Wyoming Territory, July 1872. The sun spilled over the high ridge like a shot of fire on cold steel, and Silas Everett reined in his gelding at the edge of the creek. The land was quiet, too quiet for how the birds usually chattered this time of morning. Then he spotted the pale shape between the rocks and the brush too still to be sleeping. He was off his horse before it finished stepping, boots crunching dry dirt. His heart slammed hard as he knelt beside her. A woman, mid-20s, maybe. Her dress was torn at the hem, thick with dust. Stray curls of dark hair clung to her damp forehead. Her skin was flushed with heat, and her lips were cracked, dry as August. "Ma'am." Silas touched her shoulder gently. "Can you hear me?" No response. He eased an arm under her back, lifting her carefully. She was burning up, breath shallow. He looked around. No wagon, no horse, nobody else in sight. Just her. Silas carried her to his horse, mounted with her cradled close, and turned back toward his cabin. It was a hard ride, the kind that made a man feel every bone in his body, but she needed water, shelter, someone to keep her from slipping away. He barely remembered tying off the horse or pushing through the cabin door. He laid her on his cot, soaked a cloth, and pressed it to her forehead. Her body twitched faintly, a low sound catching in her throat. "You stay with me now," he muttered, voice low, steady. "I got you." He kept at it for hours, spooning water into her mouth when she could take it, cooling her skin, watching her face for any sign of recognition. It was past sundown when she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, hazel and glassy, then focused on him. Her voice came in a rasp. "Where am I?" "You're safe. Found you by the creek, near passed out from the heat." Silas dipped the cloth again and dabbed her lips. "Name's Silas Everett. You got one." She blinked a few times, slow. "Nadine. Nadine Boone." "All right, Nadine. You just rest. You're all right now." Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer before she let her eyes close again. By the next morning, she could sit up with help. Her voice was stronger, though hoarse. "I was with a wagon train, heading west. We stopped near the hills for water. I stepped away, just a little, and the horse spooked. Took off. I chased it but got turned around. Tried to get back, but her voice broke off. They must have thought I was gone." Silas nodded, jaw tight. "You wandered near 20 miles off the main trail. Lucky I found you when I did. I thought I was going to die out there." "You did not." She looked at him, really looked, and something quiet passed between them. Grateful, but deeper than that. Like she was trying to see the man behind the help. Over the next few days, she regained strength. She helped sweep the cabin, stirred the fire, even mended a torn shirt of his with thread she found in the supply chest. Silas noticed how her fingers moved when she worked, gentle, steady. She had a quiet way of fitting into the place, like she had always belonged. One evening, he found her on the porch, bare feet tucked beneath her, watching the sky turn orange. "You ever think about settling down?" she asked, not looking at him. He leaned on the post beside her. "Used to. After my brother died in the war, I stopped thinking about anything much." "I'm sorry." He was the one who talked about building something. A ranch, a family. I just followed him around, shooting coyotes and fixing saddles. She smiled faintly. "Well, maybe it's not too late." He glanced at her. "You believe in second chances?" "I have to. I lost my parents to fever. My brother to a river crossing. I held on to hope so long it turned into habit." Silas sat down beside her. "You saved me," she said. "You could have left me there. I do not leave people behind." She looked at him again, eyes soft now. "I do not think you ever really let anyone in either." Silas did not answer right away. The wind moved through the grass. The silence felt full. "I do not know how," he admitted. Her hand brushed his just a touch. "Maybe I could teach you." It was not flirtation. It was not pity. It was something real, something steady. Like she was offering him a path, not dragging him down one. He turned his hand, let their fingers lace. Her grip was sure. By the end of the week, she had regained her full strength. Silas offered to ride her back toward the trail, maybe catch up with the wagon train. She hesitated. "They might be long gone by now," she said. "And even if they are not, I do not exactly have a place waiting for me." "You do." He said it before he could think, but he meant it. She looked at him, surprised. "I have not had a reason to stay anywhere in a long time," she said softly. "You got one now." She smiled at that. "You sure?" He reached for her hand again, held it firm. "I am." They stood close in the doorway, the wind brushing her hair into his face. He tucked it behind her ear. For the first time in years, Silas felt something shift inside him, not a storm, but the quiet after. Like peace had finally come, soft and steady. And Nadine? She leaned in first, her lips finding his, slow and sweet. Neither of them said a word after. They did not need to. 2 weeks passed without the shape of a plan, but something steady took root between them. The days moved quiet and full, like the land after a long rain, new green pushing up where no one expected. Nadine rose early, always before the sun cleared the rise, and Silas would find her at the basin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair pinned back with a sliver of metal she'd found in the drawer. She'd taken to heating water on the stove before he was up, just enough for washing. He didn't ask her to, she just did. That morning, she was scrubbing the skillet with the last of the ashes when he stepped in from the corral, hands raw from mending the fence. "You ever think about keeping chickens?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "We could build a coop behind the shed." "I saw a few boards that'd hold." She rinsed the pan, then faced him. "I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere." He rested an arm on the doorframe, nodding once. "I could ask old Mr. Denny down the ridge. He's got hens coming out his ears." Nadine smiled, then dried her hands. "If we hatch 'em ourselves, we'll need to keep a close eye. Snakes'll take the eggs if we're not careful." A breeze moved through the open window, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil. Silas watched her for a moment, how she moved without hurry, how nothing about her felt temporary anymore. Later that day, they walked the ridge above the cabin, looking for wild herbs. Nadine had taken to studying the land like it was a book, bending to touch stalks, picking out the petals that still held moisture. "Your brother," she said, brushing dust from her skirt. "What was his name?" "Eli," Silas answered. "He was older by 2 years. Smarter, too. Folks thought he'd be a doctor. Ended up carrying a rifle instead." They walked a while before she spoke again. "You never talk about him." "I used to dream he'd ride up one day, laughing like he always did. Then I stopped dreaming altogether." Nadine crouched beside a patch of yarrow. "You still carry him, though." "I can see it." Silas nodded, then crouched beside her. "You talk in a way that makes people feel like they ain't being watched." "I was raised listening more than speaking. My father used to say God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason." He plucked a stalk of sage and rolled it between his fingers. "You ever think about having a place of your own? Not just staying here building something that's yours?" "I thought I might teach," she said, standing again. "There's a railroad town not far off. Might be children there if the families stay through winter." Silas looked toward the southern pass. "You could ride in twice a week. Stay here in the in-between." "If you're sure," she said. "I've never been more sure of anything." That night, as the wind picked up over the hills, Silas lit the lamp and set it on the table. Nadine sat cross-legged on the rug, mending a tear in one of his shirts. He poured 2 cups of boiled chicory and handed her one. "Do you miss anything from before?" he asked. She considered that. "I miss music," she said. "Back in Missouri, we'd gather on Sundays. Someone always had a fiddle." Silas nodded. "My mother played dulcimer. I'd sit on the porch and listen until the stars came." "Do you still have it?" "No. Gone with the house." She reached out and touched his hand, just once. "We'll fill this place with new sounds." He didn't answer right away, but the way he looked at her, like he saw something more than just the woman who'd wandered into his life, was answer enough. Outside, the wind carried the scent of wild sage. Inside, the lamp burned steady, casting their shadows long against the wall. Neither of them said another word. They didn't need to. There was nothing missing in the quiet they shared. The first frost arrived quiet, silvering the grass and clinging to the porch railings before dawn. Silas stood with his coat collar up, watching his breath rise into the gray light as Nadine stepped down beside him, cinching a shawl around her shoulders. "Snow's not far off," he said. She touched the railing, fingertips brushing the thin ice. "I've never wintered in the mountains before. You'll feel it in your bones soon enough. We'll cut more wood today." "Stack it higher by the shed." She nodded. "I'll help with the splitting." "You don't need to, I want to." They worked together through morning, the air sharp enough to sting their lungs. Nadine steadied the logs on the block while Silas brought the axe down clean. She didn't flinch at the sound or the weight of the work, just handed him another each time. Her skirt was damp to the knees by noon, her cheeks raw with cold, but she never asked to stop. Inside, the fire roared high while she warmed her hands near the stove. Silas poured stew into 2 bowls. She ate with quiet hunger, setting her spoon down only to glance out the window. "There's a boy in town," she said, still looking outside. "Name's Caleb. About 7. His mother's the laundress near the station. He can't read." Silas looked up. "You thinking of teaching him?" "If his mother agrees. He's bright. Remembers everything he hears. But he's never held a book." "You want to start a school?" "Not yet. Just a table and a lamp to start with." Silas leaned back. "We'd have to haul wood there, keep the place warm. I could use the corner of the general store. Mr. Klein's offered it before, when I asked about sending for paper." He watched her face as she talked not the words, but the way her mouth shaped them, the way her eyes didn't drift. She was already building something again, only this time it had roots. Later that week, Silas rode out to check the southern fence line after a storm blew through. When he returned, wet to the waist, he found Nadine with a bundle of dried corn husks in her lap, twisting them into small dolls by the fire. "For the children?" he asked, hanging his coat by the door. "For the ones who won't have much this winter. I thought they might like something to hold." He crouched beside her, watching her fingers fold and tie. "You always think about others first?" She glanced at him. "I used to think that was what women were supposed to do. Then I started choosing it for myself." "You think I'm selfish?" "No." She set the finished doll beside the others. "I think you've been alone so long, it's hard to tell the difference." He sat beside her on the floor. The fire popped once, sending up a faint thread of smoke. "You're not the same man I met," she said. "You listen different now. You speak less, but it means more. I didn't know I could change. You didn't have to. You just had to let someone see you." They sat in the warmth, the dolls set in a neat line between them. Nadine reached for his hand, not to hold it, but to trace the scar that ran along the base of his thumb. "How'd this happen?" "Barbed wire. Year after Eli passed. I wasn't watching what I was doing." "You keep everything inside," she said. "I was raised to." "I wasn't." He turned to look at her. "I know." She leaned and then, slow and sure, pressing her lips to the side of his neck. It wasn't a kiss so much as a promise that she'd keep showing up, keep teaching him how to let the world in. And Silas, in the hush of firelight, breathed her name like it was something holy. By late November, the roof creaked under its first true burden of snow, and the days leaned short and gray. Silas kept a lantern trimmed and ready by the door, and Nadine stitched thick linings into their coats with wool she'd bartered from a passing freighter's wife. Their rhythm had shifted, not just survival now, but something quieter and more mutual, like 2 rivers folding into one. One morning, while Silas hauled feed through the drifts, Nadine pulled down the cedar box he kept on the high shelf above the hearth. She'd noticed it once when dusting but hadn't asked. Now, curiosity edged past politeness. She opened it gently. Inside were a few faded letters, a coin from Vicksburg, and a small daguerreotype, 2 boys in matching suspenders, one grinning too wide, the other staring straight ahead, jaws set even then. She traced the edge of the photograph with her thumb. When the door opened behind her, she turned. "I didn't mean to pry," she said. Silas shut the door slowly, snow trailing off his shoulders. "You're not prying. I found your brother's face." He stepped forward, gloves still on. "That picture was taken in Missouri. My mother said I was too stiff, but Eli wouldn't sit still long enough for another. You look like him. Around the eyes. He made me laugh. I didn't know how much that meant until after." She closed the box and set it back in its place. "I've been thinking," he said, pulling his gloves off, "about spring. The creek's got good flow. I could dig us an irrigation trench. Plant oats, maybe some beans." Nadine leaned against the mantel. "You want a farm?" "Not big. Just enough for us. Maybe the school children, if it grows well." She considered that. "We need a root cellar. I know how to stack stone for one." His brow lifted slightly. "Where'd you learn that?" "My uncle taught me, back in Arkansas. He was a quiet man. Didn't say much unless it was about dirt or drainage." Silas shrugged out of his coat, hanging it by the stove. "Sounds like someone I'd have gotten along with. Only difference is, he never let anyone near his plans. You've started letting me in." He looked at her. Then, not with surprise but with a kind of quiet pride. "You've earned it." That night, as wind shivered the eaves, Nadine reached beneath the cot for the folded paper she'd kept hidden since the first snowfall. She smoothed it out on the table. "What's that?" Silas asked, sipping from his tin cup. "Land deed. The preacher's wife in town gave me the name of a registrar. Says I can file a claim on that plot behind the ridge. It's open." Silas set down his cup. You thinking of leaving? No. She turned the paper toward him. I'm thinking of staying, but I want my name on something here. Not just yours. He read the lines without touching them. You're serious. I've never had anything that couldn't be taken from me. I want this to be different. He nodded once, slow and firm. Then we'll ride in together, after the thaw. She folded the deed again and tucked it into the pocket of her skirt. Outside, the wind settled. Inside, their silence stretched long, but full like the pause before a promise. Silas stepped behind her, resting a hand at her waist, not demanding anything, just being there. I don't know how to say what this means, he said. You don't have to, she whispered. I feel it every time you stay. He leaned close, pressing his forehead to her shoulder. No words followed. Just the hush of breath and the heat of the stove and the knowledge that, somehow, they had built something neither of them had known they could want. Something that would last. The earth softened in April. Snowmelt crept down from the high places, pooling along the low banks, dark and cold. Silas stepped from the barn one morning and found Nadine kneeling in the garden bed behind the cabin, bare hands in wet soil. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows, and earth darkened the creases of her palms. You're planting? He asked, brushing hay from his coat. Peas first. They'll take to the cold better than most, she said, not looking up. If the weather holds, I'll sow carrots by Sunday. He crouched beside her, watching her press the seeds into shallow rows. You've got a good feel for this. I grew up watching things grow. You don't forget it, even if you go years without touching a spade. Silas glanced down the hill. The ridgeline was bare now, the last snow clinging only in shadows. We can ride in tomorrow. File the deed. She sat back on her heels. You still sure about that? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, folded cloth. When she opened it, nestled inside was a simple gold ring, dulled at the edge but unbent. It was my mother's, he said. I've carried it since I left home. Thought maybe one day I'd know when it was time to pass it on. Nadine held it in her fingers. This is the day. He took her hand, slid the ring gently onto her finger. It fit snug. No preacher? She asked. He shook his head. Don't need one to tell me what I already know. The next morning, they hitched the wagon before sunrise and rode into town. The trail had dried enough to keep the wheels from sinking, though the ruts from winter wagons still marked the road. When they arrived, Nadine stepped into the land office alone, papers folded beneath her arm, while Silas waited with the horses. She emerged 20 minutes later, eyes bright, the signed document tucked into her bodice. She didn't say anything until they were halfway home. It's done. My name's on it now. Silas reached over and laid a hand on her thigh. Yours and mine. That's how it ought to be. That spring, they built a second room onto the cabin. Nadine measured and marked the beams, Silas sawed and nailed. They argued about where the window should go. She wanted morning light. He preferred the western view, but in the end, they settled on both. 2 windows, one on either side. In May, the first of the children began arriving. Nadine cleared space inside the general store and laid out simple benches. Silas made a writing desk from leftover pine. Caleb, the boy she'd once mentioned, was first through the door, cap askew and eyes wide. Others followed, shy and curious. In the evenings, Nadine would tell Silas about the lessons. How Ruthie had sounded out her first sentence, how Thomas had drawn a horse with 6 legs and refused to change it. Silas listened, sometimes carving a length of wood, sometimes just watching her hands move as she spoke. One night, in early June, they sat together beneath the cottonwoods along the creek. The sky stretched wide and pink above them, and the grass brushed their ankles where they lay. You ever wonder, she said, what would have happened if you hadn't been riding past that creek? He turned his head toward her. No, I don't think about what didn't happen. Only what did. Nadine reached for his hand. I never thought I'd feel safe again, let alone loved. You are, he said simply. She smiled, then leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. Tell me something you've never told anyone. Silas was quiet for a long while. Then he spoke, his voice low. When I came back from the war, I didn't speak to another person for almost a year. Didn't say a word. I'd go to town and nod. That's it. Words felt dangerous. And now, he looked down at her. Now I know they're only dangerous if you don't mean them. She kissed his jaw, slow and sure. I mean everyone I say to you. That night, they lay in the new room, windows open to the warm air. The sound of frogs drifted in from the creek, and Nadine traced shapes along Silas's chest with her fingertips. They didn't speak. There was nothing left that needed saying. That summer, the garden thrived. The coop held 6 hens, and a 7th came along from a neighbor's clutch. Nadine named them after constellations. Silas rolled his eyes, but he built them a shaded roost by the shed. By August, the school had grown to 9 children, and the townsfolk began bringing jam jars and extra bread for the little ones who came without lunch. Nadine taught them letters, numbers, and stories from the Psalms. Silas carved tiny wooden animals for their pockets. On a clear morning in September, they stood together beneath the cottonwoods again. Same place, same light. "You happy?" he asked. Nadine turned to him, her eyes steady. "I'm home." He pulled her into his arms, held her there until the sun lifted fully over the ridge. And in that quiet place, with nothing left unanswered and the future unfolding like a field after winter, Silas Everett and Nadine Boone stayed. They stayed for the seasons, for the work, for the love that had grown between them not in haste, but like the land itself. Slowly, deeply, meant to last. And it did.